The information from Yahoo News. Biden administration announces $250 million Ukraine military assistance package as U.S. exhausts available funding. The U.S. State Department announced a $250 million Ukraine military aid package on Wednesday, the last such package the U.S. will provide to Ukraine until Congress approves the Biden administration's funding requests. This package provides up to $250 million of arms and equipment under previously directed drawdowns for Ukraine, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in a statement. Capabilities provided in today's package include air defense munitions, other air defense system components, additional ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, 155 mm and 105 mm artillery ammunition, anti-armor munitions, and over 15 million rounds of ammunition. Last week, the Biden administration said it had one more Ukraine security package to announce this year, but it would be the final one the U.S. could provide without lawmakers' approval. Defense Department Comptroller Mike McCord said in a letter to Congress that once these funds are obligated, the department will have exhausted the funding available to us for security assistance to Ukraine. This package marks the limit of the U.S. ability to provide weapons to Ukraine without additional funding from Congress. The Biden administration has asked Congress for a supplemental package including more than $60 billion in aid for Ukraine, but the legislation is currently stalled as negotiators try to find a compromise on border security and immigration policy, key Republican demands as part of any deal. The administration has repeatedly warned that its ability to provide aid to Ukraine was rapidly dwindling, forcing the Pentagon to stretch what little money it had left into smaller aid packages. It is imperative that Congress act swiftly, as soon as possible, to advance our national security interests by helping Ukraine defend itself and secure its future, Blinken said. Earlier this month, the U.S. announced security packages worth $200 million and $175 million, relatively small compared to the much larger aid packages the administration has been able to send in the past. The U.S. has sent more than $46 billion in military aid to Ukraine since Russia's invasion began in February 2022. This aid package announced Wednesday falls under Presidential Drawdown Authority, which is pulled directly from U.S. stocks and can be shipped quickly to Ukraine. The U.S. already exhausted the other key form of assistance, the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which allows the Defense Department to contract with arms manufacturers to purchase weapons for Kyiv. December 28, 2023, 6:27 a.m. PST. What and where are Russia's $300 billion in reserves frozen in the West? Moscow, December 28. Reuters. After President Vladimir Putin sent troops into Ukraine in 2022, the United States and its allies prohibited transactions with Russia's central bank and finance ministry, blocking around $300 billion of sovereign Russian assets in the West. The United States has proposed that working groups from the Group of Seven, G7 major industrialized nations explore ways to seize that money, according to the Financial Times. What are these assets, where are they, and what could Russia do if the assets were confiscated? Central bank reserves. Like other central banks, the Russian central bank placed some of its gold and foreign exchange reserves in liquid assets such as major currencies, gold and government bonds. About half of those reserves were held in the West. The central bank has confirmed that about $300 billion worth of assets have been frozen in the West. Total Russian foreign currency and gold reserves totaled $612 billion at the time. Putin has accused the West of unleashing an economic war against Russia and has called the freezing of the reserves theft. Central Bank Governor Elvira Nabiullina was criticized by nationalists for allowing such a large chunk of the bank's reserves to be frozen. What was frozen? The Russian central bank has not given a detailed breakdown of what was frozen, but a rough outline can be gained from documents detailing Russian holdings at the beginning of 2022. At that time, Russia's central bank held around $207 billion in euro assets, $67 billion in US dollar assets, and $37 billion in British pound assets. It also had holdings comprising $36 billion of Japanese yen, $19 billion in Canadian dollars, $6 billion in Australian dollars, and $1.8 billion in Singapore dollars. Its Swiss franc holdings were about $1 billion. Russia's central bank said these assets were mainly invested in foreign securities, bank deposits, and Nostro correspondent accounts. The bank's biggest bond holdings were in the sovereign bonds of China, Germany, France, Britain, Austria, and Canada. Russia's gold reserves were held in Russia. Investments in yuan are held in China. How were the assets held? Russia's central bank did not hide behind complex chains of nominal holders, so identifying the assets will not be difficult. Most of the assets, including those of private Russian citizens, have been frozen at depositories. Confiscation? Russian officials have repeatedly warned that the state confiscation of assets goes against all the principles of free markets. Let's see what they decide, one senior Russian official told Reuters on condition of anonymity. The protection of private property is a sacred cow that has been feeding them for many centuries. Some Russian officials have suggested that if Russian assets are confiscated, then foreign investors' assets stuck in special so-called Type C accounts in Russia could face the same fate. Some foreign assets were effectively locked in the C accounts. It is not clear exactly how much money is in these accounts, but Russian officials have said it is comparable to the $300 billion of Russian reserves frozen. Finance Minister Anton Siluanov said last week that there were significant funds on the C accounts. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters last week that Russia would challenge any confiscation in the courts. If something is confiscated from us, we will look at what we will confiscate, Peskov said. We will do this immediately. December 28, 2023, 7:43 a.m. PST. U.S. allies reluctant on Red Sea task force. Washington, Madrid, Rome, December 28, Reuters, U.S. President Joe Biden hoped to present a firm international response to Yemen's Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping by launching a new maritime force, but a week after its launch, many allies don't want to be associated with it, publicly, or at all. Two of America's European allies who were listed as contributors to Operation Prosperity Guardian, Italy and Spain, issued statements appearing to distance themselves from the maritime force. The Pentagon says the force is a defensive coalition of more than 20 nations to ensure billions of dollars worth of commerce can flow freely through a vital shipping choke point in Red Sea waters off Yemen. But nearly half of those countries have so far not come forward to acknowledge their contributions or allowed the U.S. to do so. Those contributions can range from dispatching warships to merely sending a staff officer. The reluctance of some U.S. allies to link themselves to the effort partly reflects the fissures created by the conflict in Gaza, which has seen Biden maintain firm support for Israel even as international criticism rises over its offensive, which Gaza's health ministry says has killed more than 21,000 Palestinians. European governments are very worried that part of their potential electorate will turn against them, said David Hernandez, a professor of international relations at the Complutense University of Madrid, noting that the European public is increasingly critical of Israel and wary of being drawn into a conflict. The Iran-backed Houthis have attacked or seized a dozen ships with missiles and drones since November 19, trying to inflict an international cost over Israel's campaign, which followed the October 7 rampage in southern Israel by Hamas militants that killed 1,200 people and took 240 hostage. The navies of the United States, Britain and France have each shot down Houthi-launched drones or missiles. A person familiar with Biden administration thinking said the U.S. believes escalating Houthi attacks call for an international response separate from the conflict raging in Gaza. The Rhea Sea is the entry point for ships using the Suez Canal, which handles about 12% of worldwide trade and is vital for the movement of goods between Asia and Europe. Houthi attacks have seen some ships rerouted around Africa's Cape of Good Hope, substantially increasing sailing time and costs. Denmark's giant container firm Maersk said on Saturday it would resume shipping operations in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. But Germany's Hapag-Lloyd said on Wednesday it still believes the Red Sea is too dangerous and will continue to send ships around the Cape of Good Hope. Discord over Gaza. While the U.S. says 20 countries have signed up for its maritime task force, it has announced the names of only 12. We'll allow other countries, defer to them to talk about their participation. U.S. Major General Patrick Ryder told reporters last week. The EU has signaled its support of the Maritime Task Force with a joint statement condemning the Houthi attacks. Although Britain, Greece and others have publicly embraced the U.S. operation, several mentioned in the U.S. announcement were quick to say they are not directly involved. Italy's defense ministry said that it would send a ship to the Red Sea following requests from Italian ship owners and not as part of the U.S. operation. France said it supports efforts to secure freedom of navigation in the Red Sea but that its ships would remain under French command. Spain has said it will not join Operation Prosperity Guardian and opposes using an existing EU anti-piracy mission, Atalanta, to protect Red Sea shipping. But on Wednesday, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said he was willing to consider the creation of a different mission to tackle the problem. Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates earlier proclaimed no interest in the venture. Public anger over Israel's Gaza offensive helps explain some of the reluctance of political leaders. A recent YouGov poll found that strong majorities of Western Europeans, particularly Spain and Italy, think Israel should stop military action in Gaza. There is also the risk that participating countries become subject to Houthi retaliation. The person familiar with the U.S. administration's thinking says that it is this risk, rather disagreements over Gaza, driving some countries to steer clear of the effort. That appears to be the case for India, which is unlikely to join the U.S. operation, according to a senior Indian military official. An Indian government official said the government worries that aligning itself with the U.S. could make it more of a target. One European diplomatic source downplayed concerns about cohesion in the coalition and said the effort was still taking shape and not in jeopardy of falling apart. The source added that Washington's allies understood the challenges confronting Biden at home with regard to the Israel-Gaza war. International support needed. In reality, many European and Gulf countries already participate in one of several U.S.-led military groups in the Middle East, including the 39-nation Combined Maritime Forces, CMF. The EU's Atalanta operation already cooperates in a reciprocal relationship with CMF, according to a spokesperson for the group. That means that some countries not formally joining the Red Sea Maritime Task Force could still coordinate patrols with the U.S. Navy. For example, while Italy, a member of Atalanta, has not said it will join Operation Prosperity Guardian, an Italian government source told Reuters that the U.S.-led coalition is satisfied with Italy's contribution. The source added that the decision to send a naval frigate as part of existing operations was a way to speed the deployment and did not require a new parliamentary authorization. The U.S. effort to draw international support for its Red Sea security push comes as the United States faces pressure on multiple fronts from Iran's military proxies in the region. Beyond the Houthis in Yemen, Iran-backed militia have been attacking U.S. troops in Syria and Iraq. So far, the United States has carried out limited retaliatory air strikes against the militia in Iraq and Syria, but it has refrained from doing so in Yemen. Michael Mulroy, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East under the Trump administration, said the Pentagon's goal with the new maritime coalition appeared to be to make any future Houthi attacks an international issue in order to divorce it from the Israel-Hamas war. Once the military vessels in Operation Prosperity Guardian start protecting commercial shipping and come under a direct attack, the Houthis will be attacking the coalition, not just the U.S., Mulroy said.